Hi there, folks. This is not going to be a particularly thorough video on the build, as I may end up making a guide on this character, but I do want to actually play it through the end game first before I do so. But I've gotten a lot of questions on what I'm going to be league starting, so I figured I'd make a bit video going over it and give you guys a brief overview. There's going to be a link to this path of building in the description. Do be aware, though, that any of the choices that I make here are subject to change as I play the build and find out, what needs adjusting here or there or wherever, and, make decisions about some of the things I'm on the fence on right now. So, that said, what character is this? This is a Toxic Rain Ballista champion. Why are you doing Toxic Rain Ballista champion? I've gotten that question a few times while practicing it. Ballista support is something I've been meaning to use since they initially changed ranged attack totems to ballistas and did a bunch of other stuff, like putting some more nodes in the tree for them. They're buffing ballista support pretty massively. It's going from a 33% less damage multi to a 20% less damage multi, which is a very big deal for endgame damage scaling. And the changes to champion are actually a buff in the instance of this build instead of a nerf. So champion lost percent attack damage on unstoppable hero, but Toxic Rain doesn't like that. It doesn't scale off attack damage. That doesn't do anything. But it does scale off the attack speed that got buffed with the recent changes. Fortify effect on the small nodes was recently added as well, instead of, I think it was attack damage, which again we didn't scale off of, but Fortify effect is obviously great. And then they also buffed the reduced damage taken if you've taunted an enemy on Conqueror, and just taking less damage is always good. And the reason specifically for Champion instead of going, say, Trickster or Deadeye or Raider is because I do plan on playing this in Hardcore, and Champion has some of the best defensive tools for this build while still being more than capable of getting enough damage. Permanent Fortify is obviously excellent, and then, like I said, 10% reduced damage taken is great, not to mention the fact that totems will taunt on hit, which means that those totems will cause enemies to deal 20% less damage with hits and ailments against other targets, and I'm an other target in that situation. So if I haven't hit the enemy, they're still doing less damage to me if my totem has hit the enemy. So that's why Champion. Let's go over some of the basics of the tree, some of the basics of the gear, and I'll throw some numbers your way and give you an idea of both the strengths and weaknesses of the character. As far as gear is concerned, I've been pretty conservative with this. 2 properties in a crafted mod pretty much across the board on all the rare items. So we've got a +2 gems bow with attack speed and dot multi. Should be relatively easy to alt regal spam into this. It is a 6-link. You can get this 6-link bow base from a div card set that drops in a T5 map, or if you are willing to, you can even farm it in Foothills, the T5 map being Desert Spring. This is a 2-prop plus crafted mod quiver. Generic dot multi, life, and attack speed. Crafted attack speed is as good as the highest tier of attack speed that you can naturally roll on a quiver, so it's actually perfectly fine to craft it. We have life and dodge while focused. You could also go for Fizz Taken as fire here. Chest piece is life and some spell dodge, since this is a dodge-based build that uses things like Fortify, and potentially, eventually, we do Fizz Taken as fire and min endurance charges to deal with hits that get through our dodge, as well as Wind Dancer. We have attack speed, life gloves. You actually don't want gripped gloves here. That was a mistake. You want slink, because projectile attack damage doesn't scale Toxic Rain's dot. I think the path of building just defaults to gripped gloves if you choose evasion base. And Series Step for some dodge, move speed, and life. Nothing wrong with these. They're a good pair of boots. The allocation here does cost a silver oil, I believe, so we're not going to have that early on. You're going to have to cut some DPS nodes somewhere else, probably the big bow wheel, in order to pick up watchtowers early. But eventually you do want to, once you get the silver oil, anoint watchtowers. It's our best anoint, I think. Shock on focus ring. I don't have shock ticked, but it's a nice damage buff if you can get it. Life ints. This build is a little bit stat starved. As you can see, I'm still under stat requirements, so you'd need to have explicit stats on the amulet, or maybe a stat roll on the helmet or something to help deal with that issue. And then belt with percent damage, and the all res is just there to simulate being at res cap, because I was too lazy to put res in all the different rares, but all of these rares are pretty good targets for res. This flask as well is simulating roughly the amount of damage that the buffed Ballista totem support is going to give us. So this damage number is close to accurate. It's probably like 10 to 20,000 damage off, which really isn't that big a deal in the grand scheme of things. As far as the jewels go, they're all 2 prop jewels, life and a damage mod. So very basic gear, and you can see we've got about 340k, 330k damage per totem. That doesn't seem like a lot, but you can place up to 5 totems with this tree, so that's about 1.5 million DPS on 2 prop rares with crafted mods, which is perfectly respectable. And there is a bunch of other gear in here if you want to explore through it. You can see what a really good bow is going to give you. You can see what some dot multi-gloves will give you. You can see what things like better rings with envy crafts, all those sorts of options are in the path of building. I'm not going to go through every single configuration, but suffice to say there's a lot of scaling available. There's even a cluster jewel version of the tree that gets you significantly more damage, as well as enabling things like onslaught from sleepless sentries and recovery on kill from brush with death, which works because the on kill effect triggers from dots even if they're from your totems, so you do get the life recovery on kill there. So yeah, there's a bunch of different options in this path of building. I encourage you to download it, play around with it, see if this is the kind of build that you might enjoy. Some caveats as to its weaknesses. Totem survivability might be an issue. That's something I have to figure out as I play. I don't think it'll be a big problem because totem placement time is 0.2 seconds, so they're fairly disposable, but it may end up being a problem. Might just have to invest into ironwood to keep them alive. My mana cost is annoyingly high, and the only mana sustain mechanism that you can do on a budget on this build is an Eternal Mana Flask, or an Enduring Mana Flask, I should say. But eventually you can stack enough minus mana, and then maybe a mana regen boot enchant and a flat mana regen a flat mana regen roll in like a temple piece of jewelry, and that could solve it. That is fairly high budget though, so do be prepared to use an Eternal Mana Flask early on this build, probably for the first week to week and change, depending on how much you play. And what else? The life recovery is questionable depending on the setup you go for. I currently have a life gain on hit Rain of Arrows setup, which should give lots of life recovery while clearing, but maybe not so much in a pure single target situation. And an Enduring Cry as well for if I need that burst of recovery instantly. But you don't have access to things like Leech or tons of regen like you might out of a Chieftain, though you couldn't do dot Chieftain. Anyways, you don't have Leech or tons and tons of regen, so that's worth keeping in mind. That said, though, strengths are lots of single target damage on very little budget. Lots of mitigation and good avoidance, so despite the fact that your recovery is not stellar, you're not going to take much damage, so I don't think it'll be a problem. And it should be very solo self-found and League Start and Hardcore friendly. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it was a bit of a ramble. If you have any questions left over that I haven't answered or the Path of Building doesn't answer for you, feel free to put them in the comments below. And thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the stream, and I hope you have a good League Start and Ritual.